Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another predictions video, and in today's video I'm going to be predicting the Ngannou versus Ferreira fight. And so if you're wandering around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you're doing these, like video, and let's get straight into it. So going into this fight, Ngannou is 17-3 with 12 KOs and 4 submissions in MMA and 0-2 in boxing. Ferreira is 13-3 with 11 KOs and 1 submission. This fight is for the PFL heavyweight world title. Ngannou's last fight was a loss via KO in round 2 versus Joshua, and Ferreira's last fight was a win via KO in round 1 versus Bader. Ferreira is 6'8" and Ngannou is 6'4". Ngannou is 38 and Ferreira is 34. And to speak a bit more about just what I've been saying and this whole fight overall, it's a matchup in which has been building for a little bit of time now, and PFL have been smart in the marketing of it, and it's a fight which is relatively big still for MMA. It's not crazily big, but if Ferreira is able to get a win, then it puts a new heavyweight into the kind of grand scheme of MMA, a new kind of big heavyweight name. And so, we're waiting to, of course, see if that happens. But Ngannou is wanting to make the return after the devastating defeat against Joshua, which, I mean, of course, hasn't aged well with everything that's happened with Anthony Joshua in recent weeks. But in the moment, it was a real devastating defeat, and that's kind of fully stopped the Ngannou boxing hype. It was riding high after the Fury fight, where of course he had a lot of success and dropped Fury and basically made Fury look silly pretty much against a novice boxer, to be completely honest, where he was expected to be wiped completely out like Joshua did. But then he built a bit of hype, went to fight Joshua, which was, I mean, it was a bit of a strange fight how it all kind of came about anyway in the first place with Fury. But, and then he went to fight Joshua, and of course things happened there which didn't end up going in his favour. And now he's making this return back to MMA. It's kind of I don't know, a plus for him. It's something in which a lot of fighters don't have a backup, which is, on Forbes apparently he's making $12 million, and a backup like that is a very nice backup to have. Let's say that, if he'd have beaten Joshua, then he probably wouldn't have gone to fight Ferreira, but that was kind of already getting built in the first place after the Ferreira win against Bader. So, of course, even though he did get stopped badly, he still has this, like I say, as a backup, and it's nice to see. And it's PFL's probably biggest event yet. Like I say, there's Saudi money coming in, the Riyadh season type money, where of course, like I say, Ngannou's making a crazy amount of money. I'm sure Ferreira's making a lot of money as well, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens realistically. I mean, Ngannou's no longer kind of seen as this indestructible type force where he's just kind of powering through everyone. And maybe not, of course, against Fury, he didn't do that. But in MMA, he kind of powered for a lot of people and made it to the top in quite destructive fashion. But of course, he went away, and a lot of people kind of doubted in the first place what would happen when he left UFC, if he would be able to get the opportunities. I don't even think he had the fight announced versus Fury at that point. They did the face off after Fury versus Chisora at 3, but there wasn't really kind of anything set in stone. And then, here we are now, where Ngannou's made a lot of money from them 2 fights. He's about to make, like I say, a lot more now, and has realistically done really well for himself in that aspect, and has kind of shown that you don't have to be kind of forced down by that UFC contract. You can be your own kind of guy if you make a name for yourself, and then be able to still have success and still do well and still kind of breach it in. But there's not many fighters that have been able to do that, and so he's making a big world name for himself, and it's gonna kind of stem over to why he's able to make this the biggest PFL event. Yeah, of course, PFL are up against UFC, and the UFC did lose a big asset in Francis Ngannou leaving. Like I say, he was riding so high. We were just awaiting the return of John Jones, and then we were going to make that mega fight, which of course every MMA fan would still love to see. But now, of course, the PFL's kind of swooped in and made their own big fight. Maybe not a mega fight, but a big fight, and that has, like I say, kind of maybe one-upped the PFL over the UFC there, which is one of the first times that they've actually done that. And of course, Dana White has basically gone out and said that the PFL are losing a lot of money, and they're probably, they're not really doing too well, like, financially, and they're no real threat to the UFC. But, like I say, they are slowly getting there, and perhaps, slowly one up in UFC with a really good event and really good show in which they put on here as well. And so, yeah, I mean, Ferreira has this big opportunity, and, perhaps he's coming into it off a win against Bader, which, Bader was a good Bellator champion, but he was nowhere near kind of the level of a real world UFC contender type heavyweight. And he got shown that straight away, and Ferreira really showed that. And I suppose Ferreira, I think, has improved with American Top Team. He's been, I believe, coming on quite a lot with that. Before the fight before, perhaps wasn't a crazily good performance. I mean, that first round he was just taken to the ground and just held there the entire round, and it wasn't really the best performance. But then he managed to get the land the shot and be able to hurt his opponent to get him out of there. I can't remember what the guy's name was, but yeah, I think he has improved from the defeat he had earlier on in his PFL career. But I think that's all down to American Top Team, and perhaps if he keeps improving the way he's improving, we'll have to wait and see what kind of version Ferreira gets. I still think wrestling wise there has to be a lot of improvements, but we're just going to wait and see if that happens. Of course we didn't see that versus the Bader fight and Ngannou, of course, like I say, he's no longer seen as indestructible. Of course, what happened kind of shortly after the Anthony Joshua fight with him, this kind of outside world kind of tragedy, really, is going to be interesting to see how that affects him, if that perhaps fuels him even more, if that drives him even more, if he's only really in it now for the money. I don't necessarily know if he even needs to be in it for the money now, but, like I say, there's been a lot going on, not just, of course, the back-to-back defeats, the stuff out in the outside world has probably affected him as well. And he's been through a lot in the early part of his life, but this was kind of seen of him getting back to a high point. Even after the Fury loss, he was kind of in the riding high, and then things have come to maybe not crash down but come down quite quickly, and that could have definitely affected Ngannou, but we'll have to wait and see. Going on to the other kind of big fights in which I wanted to talk about on this event, it's 3 PFL title fights, which is brilliant, and it's some of the best talent kind of going up against some big names as well. And so also on this card is Cyborg versus Pacheco for the PFL Women's Featherweight title, in which I think Cyborg will win via TKO in round 2. This is Cyborg trying to become 5 organization world champion. They talk about world champions, but when there are different organizations, the world doesn't really count. But 5 different organization champions, and so he she of course had Invicta, Bellator, Strikeforce, UFC, and now is trying to go into the PFL as well. And so that would be such a really bolstering her kind of name, her resume, and really bolstering the legendary status in which she does realistically hold. Of course, she is 39 years old, and she's coming back off boxing as well, and has been doing very successfully in boxing, and been getting some really nice knockouts. And it was interesting to see that she was going to be on this show. I think it was, like I said, the money probably played a big factor, and of course that's kind of 5 belt type deal probably played a big factor as well. But the fact that she's been able to jump from boxing to MMA so seamlessly and be able to have success in both is a credit to her as well. And of course, she was perhaps in a UFC era where there wasn't too many huge names, too many huge fights for her to be able to become a world champion. And she did, of course, kind of face Nunes, and then, of course, got knocked out very quickly. But like I say, since then she seemed to slow down her style a bit. I think perhaps become a little bit less kind of just all over the place, but become a bit more controlled, and is really picking her shots nicely, and still has that immense power. And that's where I think she is going to be able to get that TKO win. I think Pacheco also has very good power. She's gotten a lot of stoppages in recent times, and is a PFL name which is probably one of the best PFL women's fighters currently. And it's going to be a tough test for Cyborg, but I think Pacheco's aggression is going to walk her onto a shot in which Cyborg will time her onto. And then that's where I think she can get a stoppage from there. And I think it's still that experience being over that youthfulness of Pacheco. And perhaps if it goes into the later rounds, it'll be interesting to see how Cyborg will be able to deal with it. Of course, being on the almost 40 now, how she'll be able to deal with it. But like I say, I don't think that's going to happen. And then also on this card is Evelyn versus Edwards for the Bellator middleweight world title, which I think Evelyn will win via unanimous decision. It's the rematch of this fight, of course, and the first fight was an interesting one. I mean, the first round, the first couple rounds were a bit slow until there was, of course, the big cut from Evelyn, and Edwards was not fighting badly at all. He landed a few nice counters. He was striking relatively well and was showing great takedown defense, in which he always has, and he has very good counters as well. Of course, this being Leon's brother, he does have similar kind of attributes to him to an extent. Similar kind of kicks, which they seem to be set up relatively similarly. And like I say, Evelyn, after getting cut, showed a real kind of more energy about him to really push it and be like, okay, well, we need to try and do something here. And as soon as he managed to do that, then he managed to get the stoppage. And I don't think he's going to be able to stop Edwards in this second one. I think perhaps Edwards might be able to counter him and perhaps even stumble in with a shot, but I think Evelyn can win by unanimous decision. I think his striking still needs to work. I think he struggles to get in range a bit at times, and he's got very good wrestling, but he's kind of being branded by Bellator as one of the best middleweights around, possibly, but I just don't think so at the moment. And I would love to see him still in the UFC to really kind of test how he could deal with some of the top names in there. But for now, I still think he's going to be able to win by unanimous decision and keep this Bellator belt. But I would like to see him in against, like I say, new opposition, different type of opposition, and like I say, perhaps moving away from Bellator now, because I think he has kind of done all he can realistically do in Bellator. Moving back on to the main event to speak about Ngannou as a fighter. So of course this is kind of like what I'm going to say is going to be a mix of like his MMA and his a few boxing fights as well. And so of course he's very strong. Everybody knows how strong he is, and that ability to just throw you about, and that's what he did to Ciryl Gane in his last MMA fight. Just completely throw him about, and I don't think that's anything that's going to go. But that wrestling that he showed in that Ciryl Gane fight was excellent. And I think he was really progressing well with his wrestling and was improving a lot. And I think it caught a lot of people by surprise how good he actually was. But I don't think it's going to be interesting to see. He hasn't trained MMA, I bet, properly, except for this fight for a little while now. And Ferreira has been locked in, like I say, with American Top Team, training wrestling consistently. And so perhaps some of the wrestling abilities in which he has and some of the skills in which he was learning and developing may have slowed down a bit because of, like I say, him not having that as his sole focus for the most recent times, for the most recent fights. He hasn't needed to do that. He's patient in a lot of his work. I think he's had to show improvements in his patience throughout his career because he does get tired and he will, slow down, but that's, like I say, resulted into him having to show patience. He's massive. There's so much kind of physical attributes about him that are good, and that pure strength is brilliant to be able to see. But like I say, I think it does come with that struggle to be able to go the 5 round distance if you are fighting at a really high pace, and that's where Ferreira might be able to have more of an advantage. Even though Ferreira is a big guy, I think he is possibly able to go into the later rounds a little bit better, or be able to keep the fight at a high pace for a longer time. Because if you think about it, Ngannou was losing the first couple of rounds versus Gane because I think he was trying to save himself for the later rounds where he became much stronger. He's got very good striking out of the clinch. I mean, of course, that was shown versus Tyson Fury when he was able to do that. And yeah, like I can say, in general, striking out of a clinch is very successful. And I think he's got better inside work than that of Ferreira. Getting him off, of course, is something that's very difficult. And like I mentioned before, I don't think Ferreira's ground game is very amazing, and I think he struggles to get a lot of opponents off him in the first place. So if Ngannou can get him to the ground like he was very much able to do against Gane, I think he can have success. He imposes himself. I think he's got aggressive ground and pound. So does Ferreira if he does get you on on your back. He doesn't respect his opponents, and perhaps that could be a bad thing going against Ferreira, who does pick his shots very well and does have that accuracy and that power to be able to kind of get you out with one punch. He can control the tempo. He controls the center. He's often quite explosive with his work and can land beautiful overhands with being quite, like I say, explosive. Perhaps he's not as fast as Ferreira, but like I say, when he charges forward with them overhands, it is hard to be able to counteract that. He's good at finding top position, and like I say, was doing that really well versus Garn, and he picks his shots very nicely. Negatives about him, of course, he has been hurt badly now, and this was, after him being seen as having this indestructible chin, he's now been hurt very badly, and so this could play a real factor, if not, not saying that he's going to be having a weak chin, but it could cause hesitancy, and we'll have to wait and see. He walks onto shots, he comes in often in straight lines, and Ferreira, like I say, has got very good accurate with that timing ability of his. He could definitely catch him coming in. Perhaps overconfident for certain fights. Finding his range can sometimes be a bit of a problem, and against Ferreira that could be a bigger issue. Creating openings on the feet, I think, can sometimes be an option. Loading up a bit too much on his shots, like I say, the patience there, but loading up a bit too much at times. Has quite a wide stance, an open guard. His head can be on the line. He can tire against pressure. I think sometimes he can struggle against pressure. His countering ability isn't crazily good, and committing to combinations is something in which I don't necessarily think he's always, I think he can sometimes just go in with them singular shots or just with that wrestling or, not actually committing to big combinations. And he can get caught when he's changing levels, or at least trying to change levels. Speak about Ferreira as a fighter, he's got a very good pumping jab, and if he is able to utilise that with the other straight shot in which he can, like I say, he has got very good timing. He can definitely catch Ngannou coming in. He feints well. He's accurate, light on his feet, front sword, back foot type fighter. He's, like I say, got that clubbing ground and pound in which you can hear that it's very, very strong. He's patient, uses his range. He is good catching you coming in and, like I say, walking you onto shots, and he's got them fast hands as well. Negatives about him, I think he does cover up a bit when he gets taken down. There is that clip of, Aspinall has said that he doesn't believe that Ferreira is a top heavyweight because he, of course, had that loss earlier on in his PFL career where he did kind of just cover up on the ground and didn't really do too much. And like I say, in that, not the last fight versus Bader, but the one before, he got taken down and he didn't really do too much either. His chin can be in the air when he's leaning back with shots, and that's when Ngannou could time him with an overhand. His takedown defense is really not anything too impressive. He really does kind of rely on landing that shot, and he feels like perhaps he has to land that shot. Getting off his back, like I say, can be a problem. Tires when he's on the ground, I think, a bit at times, and he's kind of shown that as well. And so even if he's on his back, he can be tired. So perhaps it could, if it goes into the later rounds, be a bit of a perhaps slugfest. We'll have to wait and see. Fighting in close, like I say, can be something that he's not incredibly good at. Relies on that one shot, like I say. I think limited striking compared to that of Ngannou. Ngannou, when he's in his rhythm and he's got confidence, I think he has more of a striking variety, and he doesn't really impose himself that much at Ferreira, so Ngannou is going to probably be able to fight at his pace. Ngannou is the favourite for this fight, and I think that Ngannou is going to win via TKO in round 3. I think it could be a very slow opening couple of rounds where they're both just waiting for the other one to do something, and Ngannou, I believe, is going to be aware of Ferreira's power. I think Ferreira's only success is if he does land that one shot, but I think Ngannou, got hurt and he's coming off a bad stoppage, but I don't think his chin's gone. I still think he is able to take at least a shot from Ferreira. Of course, we have to wait and see, but if he is able to take that shot, then I think he'll be able to take him down and really have a lot of success just beating him down. And like I say, if he improves throughout the fight, and normally he starts to kind of turn up that pace into the third round if he is going to improve throughout it, like he did versus Garn, then I think it could be a similar performance then, but I think you'd be able to have more success on the ground because I think Ferreira is just not that well rounded on the ground, on his back especially, and yeah, I think he'd be able to kind of ground and pound him out to a round 3 TKO. Then who he could go on to fight, it's really interesting of who he could go on to fight yet next, to be honest, because he wants to seemingly go back into boxing. He's called out the names of like a Deontay Wilder, and to be honest, I wouldn't mind a Deontay Wilder type fight. and perhaps that could happen, and perhaps that could be still a big money fight. But Ngannou, doesn't have that backup anymore for Ferreira fight. PFL haven't really got any more kind of big heavyweight names really. So, if he goes back into possibly the UFC, it seems like Dana White isn't really too keen on working with him again. Of course, Jones is fighting Miocic, and we still all want to see Jones versus Ngannou, but I feel like that ship probably has sailed. Aspinall, of course, is another option as well, and we probably would love to see that as well. But like I say, I just don't know if we could see him going back into the UFC. So perhaps Deontay Wilder, if not, I have no real idea. He has, the complete power in his hands to do it exactly what he wants. He could just wait around and see if something comes and falls onto his lap. Like I say, we'll have to wait and see. Maybe he wants to, just have a few more PFL fights to be able to just keep racking up random names in the PFL. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, that is it for today's video. I hope you did enjoy. Like it if you didn't, like video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.